typically up in the early or mid-morning. I have to be. I was happy to do it today. Today I'm going to be speaking on behalf of ONeills, which stands for United Non-Discriminatory Individuals Demanding Our Studies. And it's an ethnic studies youth group that was formed in 2011 specifically to resist Arizona's ban on ethnic studies. At first, I'm going to give just a little bit of background. I'll talk about the ban in a little while, but I want to give a little background of the Mexican American Studies program that is now outlawed and liquidated, that the high school students and alumni and youth allies formed from the various high schools in Tucson as a coalition, which was what ONeills became. So the Mexican American Studies program, or MAS as we call it for short, was formed in 1998, and it was the result of a community-led struggle that demanded and won the institution of ethnic studies, community created from the bottom up into Tucson's largest school district, which is 65% Latino. And that movement was a direct line from the late 1960s, early 1970s, San Francisco State. That was very inspiring, and it really caught everywhere. And this program, instituted in K through 12 schools, was among the first of its kind in the United States, just like in San Francisco. So there is, first of all of this intergenerational history and memory that is involved in that. Now, the achievements were quite remarkable and quite unique. While Latino students suffer among the lowest dropout rates nationally, our multi-ethnic, mostly Latino, but also there were white, there were African American, there were Pakistani. Shalipa was one of our organizers, how she described herself. And it gave graduation rates of 90%. And the university-based study found that the MAS program students who were enrolled in that program were more likely to graduate high school than those not enrolled in the program, no matter race or ethnicity. And if you go around and talk to students who took the program and asked about what was it about this education that was so successful and remarkable, they'll tell you it was life-changing. Like that, independently, that's like a term that comes up a lot. And speaking from my perspective, the education spoke a lot to me. And first of all, a lot of the pedagogy was social justice-based programming. It was participatory action research-based. It was totally college prep. And it taught a lot about looking around in your community, getting involved, finding out how to identify injustices, and then think of some creative ways to dismantle, resist, and address them. So for me personally, I have a story, like many of us, that shows why ethnic studies was so needed and why it was created in the first place. Someone born and raised in Tucson, coming from my father's white settler family from Europe, who were born. My father was born there, and then my mother was born in Mexico. So as you might imagine, I grew up quite confused, to put it mildly. And that expressed itself in a number of ways. I remember not knowing where I first got this feeling of rejecting the language, rejecting culture growing up, like not embracing my white settler family, knowing them and wanting to know them, and not so much the sides of town where my mom grew up and didn't really know or even want to know, sadly, that part of my family, nor the part of my family which is still in Mexico. And I never thought about that for many years. And ethnic studies education, when you start to see that you're not the only one that goes through these sorts of things of self-loathing, and one of the key terms in ethnic studies pedagogy in the MAS program is de-indigenization, that process of hating yourself, erasing any kind of connection before it's made. Now, here's where ONeills comes in. In 2011, the coalition was formed, again, to specifically resist the law that was written and passed in May of 2010, first called HB 2281, later written in state law as it remains as ARS 15-12. Now, the four parts of the law, which were eventually upheld by the federal government, as they are still today, included outlining any public school program that promoted, quote, ethnic solidarity instead of the treatment of pupils as individuals, promoted the overthrow of the U.S. government. Right, as if we were actually doing that, it would be a completely different conversation. The design of the curriculum, of any curriculum for a particular ethnic group, and promoting resentment toward a race or class of people. And these all were written directly for one single course, the MAS program. And the racists in the state legislature and elsewhere throughout Arizona had it in for the program for several years until they found some inroads that could actually stick around the time of SB 1070. It was passed just a few weeks after SB 1070, in fact. Now, the way that the state authorities enforce the law is through financial sanctions on any public district that they deem is in violation of the law, and Tucson Unified School District, or TUSD, was always the only district in mind, the only program in mind. It would withhold 10% of state funding every single month until they give in. So it's a state of siege is how they sort of terrorize the community, the program, and the district leaders. And the district leaders at first wanted to support their program, but they eventually caved into pressure, and they officially banned the program in January 2012, and it included banning the program's nearly 100-book reading list, which included works by Henry David Thoreau, as was quoted yesterday, his Civil Disobedience, specifically, that was one of the readings. Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, The Tempest, Sandra Cisneros, Ana Castillo, James Baldwin, Howard Zinn, the list is on and on. In fact, there were instances of district officials going into class at Tucson High and my old high school while class was in session and literally removing the books off of the shelf and boxing them up and taking them, and they were carrying out orders which were documented by the district, which was on a Tuesday. That's when the board passed the resolution banning the program, and then by the end of the week, district officials were all over Tucson boxing up the books and putting them in a warehouse. Now, although they did ban the program in 2012, it wasn't before ONeills had forced the issue nationally and internationally by organizing, and particularly in April 2011, 9 of our members, before the school board members took their seats on the raised platform, had snuck chains in through their clothes and then rushed the dais and then chained themselves to the board members' chairs to prevent the meeting from happening, because at that time, in April 2011, there was a resolution by one of the masterminds on this and most hated of the TUSD school board members, Mark Stegeman. He tried to be the liberal, tried to make concessions. He thought he could win a middle ground between the state and the community, who were both at his neck. And he wanted to turn MAS into electives, no longer required courses to graduate, no longer a program, but electives, which would be taken on in addition to already full load in high school, which was in effect killing the program. So that board meeting was targeted to stop it and stop the illegal vote. We saw it as completely illegal and illegitimate, and so we did stop that, and it created this disruption, and it created a huge groundswell of more media attention, and it also forced the space where the nation, the state, the community hear youth voices who are always, whether it's by the teachers, other adults, the state legislators, and other in the district, are always covered up, are often covered up. So that is the background and context. I wanted to give that sort of introduction because in discussing our Palestinian solidarity activities and forms of education, it's very crucial to understand that the way that ONeills got to perceive and understand Palestinian justice, Palestinian struggle, history of the struggle for liberation, was through the perspective of what we knew best and what we were raised under pedagogically. So like learning settler colonialism, the brutality of settler colonialism, military occupation in the lands where we stood, and learning about the Mexican-American history in Tucson, things like that. So I'm going to just go over a few examples and then turn it over. So there were a couple ways. In the first year of our founding, we did a lot of internal workshops on various popular education topics and radical histories, and one of those issues was Palestine. And so it opened up a lot of youth's eyes because they could see things that they knew in their daily life, that they recognized from the history that they knew about the community and the settler colonial history, ongoing history of the United States. And that included also doing public events that harnessed the ethnic studies issue as a media and hot button issue. And we met with some students in 2011, a couple who had been touring for Right to Education, which Christian will talk with him later. He's doing a lot of bottom lining for it for this year's tour that National SJP is helping support. So they actually, the students, Palestinian students from Bear State University, met with ONeills when we were practicing the chaining. Like we had to do lots of things like trying to do it in under 20 seconds, trying to get the chains out of our clothes, and so we did a lot of that, and they visited us and exchanged stories, and it was very, very social, very familial. And we attended various and presented on various conferences, and whether the AAAS, Association of Asian American Studies, and the National SJP last year, and done a national tour where we integrated Palestine and what I'll speak about in a little while of Israel's ethnic studies ban into the presentation to discuss national and international connections to the ethnic struggle for ethnic studies. So I'm going to give three specific ways of education that really were eye-opening on Palestine solidarity. And one was when we all learned about the ban on Middle East studies that occurred in TUSD in 1983 before any of us were born, and any of us in ONeills. It's still a much buried history, and it's quite outrageous, but not unrelated to what we heard Rahim talk about yesterday with Middle East programs being targeted still. But this one was the Near Eastern Center out of the University of Arizona, and they had, in accordance with their Title VI funding, had to do community outreach, and that included having a Middle East Studies program that, according to local newspaper accounts, was in high demand in the junior high school program, schools in Tucson. And the Jewish Federation of Southern Arizona took up the American Jewish Committee's national report in 1980, in which they said that the then 11 Middle East centers were part of a pro-Arab conspiracy to control U.S. oil companies. And that's what was reported in the press without any comments. And it's a huge history that I won't go into it. A couple of things that are the most outrageous I'll mention really quickly. One of the justifications for TUSD of banning that program in 1983, which included novels, literature, classroom materials, was the compliance officer who was part of the Jewish Federation campaign. She was the one who recommended the banning, and she was supposed to be the officer for making sure that the TUSD complies with civil rights. So she said that the program, since it didn't contact Israel to provide curriculum materials, that it's biased. And that's just, and it was, again, completely reported in the press and without any comment, and that's just one of the justifications. But I'm going to skip down and maybe talk about the other two later in the question and answer session, but the other, in short, the other two things that were very specific ways of educating ourselves about Palestine, making connections, were Israel's role in the Mayan genocide in Guatemala, which was very deep and very crucial to the genocide, the extent that it happened in Guatemala, because part of the program is Maya-based, is based in Mayan concepts. In Lakech and Banchabe are Yucatec Maya principles that they mean essentially seek the root of the truth, and you are my other me. So it's a worldview, value, and critical thinking, and seeing the cultural genocide and the psychological violence of Arizona and the United States that took over for actual physical genocide that the U.S. and Israel committed in Guatemala, helped really cement those connections, as did the Israeli ethnic studies ban, which was passed 10 months after Arizona's ban, and had a lot of the same elements, right down to seeing the threat of Palestinian narratives, indigenous narratives, as a national security threat, seeing it as something that has to be illegal and defunded, because one of the enforcement of the Nakba law in Israel is also financial sanctions. So seeing those sorts of things helped us understand not only our own struggle better, but also expand our worldview and expand our sense of justice and solidarity from Tucson all over the world. So thank you. I'm going to pass it off to Chris.